Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, those watching us online. Welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the topic, how many loaves you have. And the idea is to talk a little bit about the multiplication of the loaves of bread that we find in 4 of the Gospels, John, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And I brought 2 of those here because they said there's 2 different instances. The first one was in Matthew. So this is right after Jesus learns that John the Baptist was beheaded. So he goes into a boat by himself. But the crowd kind of follows him. And they wanted to hear him and continue to be healed by him. So Jesus goes and he heals some of those who were sick, some of those who were there. But the problem is that the night started to fall and it started to become late. As evening approached, the disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the villages and buy themselves some food." Jesus replied, "They do not need to go away. You give them something to eat." And the disciples replied, we have here only 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, they answered. And then Jesus says, "Bring them here to me," meaning those loaves of bread and the fish. And Jesus, directed the people to sit down on the grass. Taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and looking up to heaven, he gave thanks and broke the loaves. Then he gave them to the disciples, and the disciples gave them to the people. They all ate and were satisfied, and the disciples picked up 12 basketfuls of broken pieces that were leftovers. So they started with a couple of bread and fish and had a couple of basketfuls of broken pieces left over. The number of those who ate was about 5,000 men, besides women and children. So the first one they talk about was 5,000 people gathered there. The second one was 4,000. And the second one, I brought the part from Mark, where it says here, "During those days another large crowd gathered. Since they had nothing to eat, Jesus called his disciples to him and said, 'I have compassion for these people. They have already been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will collapse on the way because some of them have come a long distance.' His disciples answered, 'But where in this remote place can anyone get enough bread to feed them?' And then he asks, which is the title of today's presentation, 'How many loaves do you have?' And they said 7. He told the crowd to sit on the ground. When he had taken the 7 loaves and given thanks, he broke them and gave them to his disciples to distribute to the people, and they did so. They had a few small fish as well. He gave thanks for them also and told the disciples to distribute them. The people ate and were satisfied. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 basketfuls of broken pieces that were left over. So more, again, the baskets with the leftover. About 4,000 were present. So these 2 events, very similar in their own ways, where there's a lot of people there, they're hungry, and Jesus goes and multiplies the food, another one of the miracles, and he gives the food to the people with the help of the disciples, asking them to sit down and everything. But the message, you see I bolded here how many loaves you have, but the message that inspired me to do this talk, that made me think about this, was this next one here. Well, unfortunately, we don't have this book in English, but it's a book psychographed by Chico, by Emmanuel. Message number 9, Help in Concourse. This is what it says. "Let us observe that the Lord, in front of the hungry crowd, does not ask his companions, 'How many loaves of bread do we need?' but rather, 'How many loaves do you have?'" When I read that, I paused and I was like, I never thought of it in that way. Not how many loaves, how much food do we need, but how many do you have? And thinking about, Jesus, we know the spirit of billions of years that Jesus is before he was here, before even the earth was created, the high spirit that runs our planet and everything, has done so much, walked on water, resurrected people, transformed water into wine, all of those miracles we hear about. Did he really need a little bit of bread to materialize more bread, if we think about it? And this is what made me think, why did he ask then, how many loaves do you have, instead of saying, how much do we need? Oh, here's how much we need, Here's 5,000 pieces of bread. But he asked, how many do you have? On both times. Jesus, Emmanuel's going to say, cautioned his disciples to the need for something to be presented to the divine providence as the basis for the help we beg for. In truth, the Master managed to feed thousands of people, but he did not do such without the crumbs that the apostles offered him. So the crumbs that the apostles offered him, meaning the meager sort of, not tribute, but the meager donation of the few loaves of bread and the few fish that transformed into so many. And from a literal sense. And the idea here is, again, he didn't need that, but still he asked that because Jesus was always so thoughtful in his lessons, always thinking ahead and trying to teach them something. So the idea of them asking them to present something to him, so then he can multiply that. There's no point in asking for the blessings, Emmanuel's going to say, of food by immobilizing your arms in the eyes of laziness, as it is completely inappropriate to ask for the talents of love burning your heart in the fire of hatred. Which is, again, to ask for a blessing, but do nothing to get that blessing. Do nothing to earn that. Do nothing to receive what is being asked. However, for this, it is necessary to offer him the resources that you have already managed to accumulate, this is Emmanuel saying, within yourself for the extension of progress and for the victory of good. Do not forget, therefore, that when helping others, the Lord will not do without the help, however small, that he must find in you. So the resources that we already possess, that we may give those resources, so they can be, like you're saying, the crumbs can be then multiplied, and we can truly benefit ourselves and the others. Even he's saying here, the Lord will not do without the help, however small, that he must find in you, because this is what we are meant to do. When we talk about charity, when we talk about improvement, giving something of ourselves, of what we have at our disposal, so we may see the results. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, Kardec is going to talk about asking and receiving. So he's going to say that the sustained and persevering efforts attract the blessings of the Lord. It is a magnet. So he makes that analogy, saying it's a magnet, the sustained and persevering efforts. They are magnets for the blessing of the Lord that calls to progressive grace. And he says that gives us abundant strength so we can climb the holy mountain. That's what he says in the Gospel according to Spiritism. So, but he makes this analogy with the magnet, which is interesting. Something attracting something else. But what is it attracting? What is the thing that's attracting those blessings? Sustained and persevering efforts. Again, this idea of giving something, or having something to dispose of, or to give, to donate, in order to get something else, or to receive something else. And on the same note, he also talks about the metaphor. He makes a metaphor about tilling the field, in the sense that he's saying that we have received from our Father this big field that we must till, meaning prepare the soil, tilling meaning prepare the soil, for the seeds to grow. But we must not blame the Father if there are weeds that start to come out because we're not taking care of the soil. Or if we create those little holes, and he says, if the water comes and starts to create as if swamps, little swamps in those holes because we're not cultivating it properly. We must not blame the Father for that. We have received, but in order for the seed to grow, we must work the soil. We must give something of our own effort, as Kardec said before, the sustained and persevering effort for the seeds and the crops to grow and to flourish and to provide food for the body. In the book Living Spring, this is Emmanuel again. It's a message number 89. Emmanuel is going to talk about this idea. The first one that I said that inspired me was from the other book, Words of Eternal Life. But through all those books in the Living Spring Connection, he has a message that sort of relates to this idea of giving something and relates back to the multiplication of the bread. He says, this is message number 89 on our journey. He says, we often fail at our commitments and thus greatly increase our debts. Yet, in our redemptive endeavor, we beg the Lord for His mercy, compassion, and help. And to be honest, we often get the help, but we fail to recognize the help as well. A lot of the times the help has already arrived. The help is already there. But we fail to recognize it. We fail to make use of that. And what we do, he's saying here, we beg the Lord for his mercy, compassion, and help. It is natural for us to ask for the Master's help in our afflictions and difficulties. Meanwhile, let us not forget to work for the good, with capital G, I did not capitalize that, on the most painful passages of rectification and ascension, convinced that we invariably find ourselves in the most just, beneficial, and deserved opportunity of work, and that maybe for the time being, we do not know how to choose anything better. We find ourselves in the most just, beneficial, and deserved opportunity of work, but we often neglect that. We often fail to recognize the help. We often fail to recognize when we receive that opportunity for work. And he's saying here, we can ask for help, sure, but the work for the good, this ascension, goes through these painful passages of rectification in order for us to climb further. In this book by Amelia Rodriguez, typographed by Divaldo, we also don't have it in English, Light of the World, she talks about the multiplication of the bread. And Amelia Rodriguez has a very poetic way of writing, and very beautiful way of writing, in my opinion. And she talks about, she's describing like that moment, and she's talking about Jesus here. She's saying, slightly pale, he seemed to be transfigured. He took the loaves and the fish and broke them and distributed them before the astonished eyes of those closest to him. And they became distributed and multiplied like seed, which once fertilized, unfolded into rich ears under the miracle of the earth, becoming all a harvest. Everyone approaches happily, and baskets are presented. They fill them and share the harvest with the people, who feed themselves until they are full, and there is enough left over to fill more baskets with what remains surplus and abundant. So she's talking about that moment and how Jesus was doing that, and how, he almost seemed transfigured, because in that moment, can we imagine being there at that time and seeing that, being present to witness that event? And we know that in John chapter 6, he says there's this beautiful quote by Jesus saying, "I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. Whoever believes in me will never be thirsty." So he's again making this idea, this analogy, and oftentimes we'll see this allegory with the multiplication of the bread and him being the bread of life and the word of Jesus. And Kardec in the book Genesis, chapter 15, the miracle of Jesus, he's going to talk about the different miracles that Jesus, and like some scientific presentation behind it. And he draws attention to something that's actually quite interesting, that if only it highlights if nothing else, it highlights the power of the Spirit that was Jesus Christ, the greatest Spirit to ever walk the earth here. And he's talking about the power in that moment of the word of Christ as if this bread that feeds the soul. As if the words of Jesus being so true and ringing so true in the heart, and him having this magnetism in his word that he used to put when he was talking to people, looking at people, that even then people would not be hungry. That even in that moment people would not feel hunger. And Kardec even talks about how when we're doing something that we're very focused on, we may forget to eat. Or when we're in certain situations that we become so focused, so intent in that moment, we actually hunger goes away. And he's saying this only speaks to the power and the magnitude of this Spirit that was blessed, that blessed them that day with the bread, and some say with the words being the bread, the multiplication of the bread, as in like the words going to those people, multiplying in their, that's why Amelia is talking about growing like seeds in their hearts and feeding the thousands. And it's a beautiful image if we think about it. When the those words sort of like I said, penetrating the hearts and growing there. In the message 25, be calm. There's another interesting piece that I found when I was researching to do this presentation about the multiplication of the bread. Be calm, the way, the truth, and the life. This is the book where I got that from. It's talking about that. So it says, Andrew brings the master a boy who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fishes. Jesus, however, receives the morsel, believing in its priceless significance. He tells them to have everyone sit down and for there to be order and harmony. And Emmanuel is going to say the greatness of this lesson is profound. Of course, this is a compiled version of the message. But to be ordered, why did Jesus ask them to sit down? And one of the Gospels even say that they divided them in groups before breaking the bread and spreading the bread. Why was he asking them to sit down? It's interesting to think about that. We often, I think, overlook that part in the passage. He could very well, everybody was there, he could have really started multiplying the bread, giving to everybody. But he asked them to sit down, divided them in groups, and to be calm. So this idea of establishing inner order, this is what Emmanuel is going to tell us in this message. This idea that we beg Christ for help, but we often do so in a disordered state or an orderly state. And by having people sit down and sort of calming them down, he's encouraged them to establish this inner order so they may receive the heavenly resources. Be that the bread that was multiplied physically or the word as the bread. And again, Emmanuel is saying the greatness of this lesson is profound because I think, again, it's one that it's often overlooked. And we must also have sort of this calmness in those moments where we need, or we're asking for the blessings and we need to receive them. We also need to have that order, that calmness. Again, with Emmanuel, in this book, we also don't have this one in English, unfortunately, but this one is message 91, and this is, I think, one of the most beautiful ones. He says, faced with the legion of hungry people, any man would experience invincible discouragement, considering the crumbs of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. But Jesus uses the immense power of kindness and manages to feed everyone abundantly. Can we imagine being ourselves, having 5,000 people to eat, or wanting to feed 5,000 people, and we receive 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish? We would say it's impossible. We can't. It's literally physically impossible. Many apprentices, Emmanuel is going to say, recoil when faced with the extent of the task. However, if the faithful servant walks towards the Lord, the crumb of his light is immediately supplied by the miracle of multiplication. Since Jesus, considering this spontaneous offering, will bless his small patrimony, allowing him to nourish 2 crowds of the needy. So he's going to bless the offering, no matter how small we think it is. 5 loaves of bread for 4,000 people. But Jesus is going to bless that. He's saying we're going to receive something when we give something in return. So he's talking about how this multiplication, Emmanuel is saying this message, how this multiplication of the loaves is this profound symbol of the power of love and faith when combined with dedicated action. How many loaves do you have? Not how many do we need. How many loaves do you have? How many can you bring? Oh, we only have this. Bring them here. In the other part we see with Matthew. Bring them here. Bring them to me. Which is very interesting for us to think about. He's in both instances is asking that something in order to give something else even greater. It is essential, he finishes by saying, however, not to doubt our minimal possibilities for good. Our crumbs of goodwill in the willingness to serve when led to Christ are worth more than all of the multitudes of evil in the world. This is Emmanuel, the hopeful messenger, giving us this encouragement of, doesn't matter how small we think what we have to offer, doesn't matter how small we think that thing is, we need to offer it, because those crumbs of goodwill will be multiplied when utilized by Jesus. So this teaching emphasizes that the essential thing is the sincere willingness to serve and trust in the divine providence, as Emmanuel saying. As it is through selflessness that the small becomes great. The small becomes great. Look at the interplay of words here. Through the support of Christ. So, and even when thinking about Christ always teaching them in those specific moments, we think of the disciples there. And when they're saying, oh, we have the crowd is hungry. Kardec talks about this too. When, oh, the crowd is hungry, he said, you feed them. We can even think further and imagine if when Jesus is talking about the bread, and let's say it's an allegory, let's say that's the word, him saying you feed them also means you feed them. You have been listening to me. You go and spread that as well. It doesn't matter how small, it doesn't matter how we think those are crumbs, but that's what we need, the sincere effort, the perseverance, and knowing that we have something to offer, and we must offer that. Joanna de Angelis now, this is psychographed by Givaldo, the book of Jesus in Our Days. She mentions this as well, and she says he would ask those who wanted him to heal them, and now we're making a little connection with the healing piece, not necessarily just the multiplication of the bread, but the healings of Jesus. Do you believe I can heal you? Or what do you want me to do for you? That's interesting. Because Jesus as well, obviously being who he was, he would know what the person wants. He would know what they needed. He would for sure look at them and already know before even they speak what that person wanted them to do. But he still says, do you believe I can heal you? What do you want me to do for you? That is so profound for us to think about, that he wanted us, or those he spoke with, in that moment, that be a lesson to us, that he wanted them to give something. So Joanna is going to talk about the want and receive. So these two ideas. Jesus knew, of course, what his people wanted, and he also knew that he could provide it. But he respected the laws of cause and effect, and only when the patient was willing to have a real belief, this desire that transforms everything, because in itself, the patient himself, transforms. It is because he responded to the request. So this fundamental importance of this inner security about what do I want, and second, do I believe that I can get what I want? Or am I just asking because I think it's convenient? Because I want to be rid of the pain, but I really don't think that anything anybody's going to do to me is going to help me. No, but I would love to get rid of the pain. I don't really believe in that, but who knows? Sort of like that skeptical stance we have adopted so much and for so long. And the paralytic or paraplegic, nowadays different words for that. There's also this passage, very beautiful in this book by Emilio Rodriguez. Also, I don't think we have that one in English yet.
We do.
We do. I'm so sorry. Great, even better. Chapter 7 for those watching online as well. We do. So, but there's this passage there that Amelia is going to talk about the paralytic. So they had this place where the waters would come. They would bring those people to be healed at those waters, and they would believe that depending on, I guess, the tide, like if the water was coming in strong or was not coming in, they would go and people would bathe in those waters, so they would get healed healed of their ailments, their illnesses and ailments, and whatever afflicted them. So there's this paralytic person that comes, and they lower him through ropes, and like very simple ropes, they lower him there. And he's saying, nobody, what did he say? I don't have anyone to put me in the tank when the water comes down. So he has been a paralytic for 38 years at this point. Amelia is going to tell us. He's saying, nobody wants to put me in the tank so I can get healed, but I heard about you healing people, and I want to get healed. And then Jesus comes to him and says, Nathaniel ben Elias, do you believe I can heal you? And he says with faith, he says, yes, I believe. But then he stops for a moment, and he says, and I thought this was interesting, he's like, Lord, how do you know my name? Do you know me? Can you imagine? You come to this person that is a stranger to you, and you say, I believe you can heal me, and he says your name. Nobody told me your name. And then Jesus says, yes, I have known you since forever. I am the good shepherd that knows all the sheep the Father had entrusted him with. So, and then Jesus goes and heals him, as the story goes, and he says, take your bed and go and walk, So he comes and he stops being a paralytic because he believed. And there are different historians, even in the Spiritism realm, that talk about this passage, and some of them saying, like, why is it that Jesus healed that one and not others? Because Jesus didn't go distributing cures for every thousands of people that will come. Some he would, let's say he would cure, but they're saying that Jesus would know in them if they believed that they could be healed. Jesus knew in them, and again, respecting the law of cause and effect, which is important as well, as we saw with Joanna, that they could be healed, and they really believed that they could be healed. So then Jesus could do the work. Again, let's do a parallel with the bread. They had their faith in that, was the crumbs that they offered for Jesus to do the miracle of healing them. Jesus knowing people and knowing who would benefit from it, who actually believed and who could be healed, who had the faith in God. And also, there's another historian who talks about how perhaps it was also because Jesus didn't just distribute the cures and all of that. He would speak the words, and a lot of those people didn't like the exhortation, so they didn't like what Jesus was saying, but they still want to be healed. But didn't like what, I don't agree with what you're saying, but heal me. Jesus would not heal them. Those people would not be healed. So he's saying maybe this Nathaniel paralytic person was one that really listened, and Jesus saw that he truly was believing everything that he was saying. And in the book Our Daily Bread, Faith and Work, regarding faith and work, message number 9 talks about, it is interesting to know that this is Emmanuel. Of all his disciples, the master regards the most highly those who listen to his teachings and actually put them into practice. From this, we may conclude that people of faith are not only those who are prodigious in words and enthusiasm, but those who also display attention and goodwill in light of Jesus' teachings, studying their spiritual content in order to apply them in their daily endeavors. So not just those with the eloquence of speech and with the beautiful words and the presentations and all of that, but those who are applying and studying those teachings with the goodwill, with the perseverance, and applying them in their daily endeavors. Not only when we come to the Spiritist Center, but when we're outside of it in 24 hours. That's the goal. That's what we try to do. And so I ask, in doing this sort of lecture, how many times have we asked? This is my question to you guys, and you can answer in your own heads. How many times have we asked, but we contributed with nothing? How many times have we pleaded? Have we prayed? Have we begged? But we gave nothing to be used for that request. And how many times have we asked, contributed with something, but still did not receive what we hoped for? Why might that be the case? We, as evolving humans, we think we know what we need. We don't. We know what we want, but we don't know what we truly need. So oftentimes we're going to give something, we're going to pray, we're going to beg, we're going to ask, request, and it's not going to be given. And we may revolt temporarily, hopefully temporarily, until we finally at some point understand that we don't know what we need, but God knows what we need. So to keep this in mind as well. And how many times have we asked? This is the third one. Contributed with something, received the blessing we asked for, but have gone back to the same mistakes that led us down that path. And this one made me think of the paralytic, because as we come to find out later on, he went to tell about his Jesus healing him. For the first time he went, it says, Amelia says that he was among unhappy women and drunk men. Talking about that, of the healings of Jesus, that what Jesus did to him. He didn't even know the guy's name. He's like, it was this person, I don't remember the name. Later, when he met him in the temple, he found out, oh, you're the one, oh, Jesus, yeah, you're the one who healed me. And they find out it was a Saturday, so that was forbidden. There's a whole other lecture, I guess, for that. But the idea is that we go, him going back to the same mistakes, and even Jesus cries afterwards when Peter's talking to him. Jesus is crying because he's seeing that these people are getting sort of like almost like a new chance of what they asked for. They contributed, they received it, but they're still going back to the same mistake, that same error. In Emmanuel, message 133, this is from the Living Spring. He's going to say, this is the name of this message is, what do you have? When faced with a hungry crowd, Jesus asked his disciples if there was any way they might be able to feed them. Because he says, you feed them. How many do you have, He was obviously looking for something that would serve as a basis for materializing the help they needed. How many loaves do you have? Amen is going to say. This question shows the need for some kind of concourse in the work of multiplication. How many loaves do you have? This image compels us to think about how important our cooperation is, so that the heavenly benefactor may enrich us with his gifts of abundant life. So Emmanuel says a lot of the times we expect the miracle of some sort, the multiplication for instance, but we forget to focus on the concourse of what we can provide, what we can give for that. Can the Christ build a sanctuary of happiness within us and for us if he cannot count on the basis of the goodwill in our hearts? That's the question that Emmanuel is asking us. Can the Christ build a sanctuary of happiness within us and for us? This is beautiful as well. Within us and for us, if he cannot count on the basis of the goodwill in our hearts. Many people hope for a miracle from the Lord to satiate their hunger for peace and comfort, but the Master's voice on the mount still resounds unforgettable. What do you have? God's goodness is infinite. Still something must emerge from ourself on our behalf. Something must emerge from ourself on our behalf. And Emmanuel finishes by saying, in any arena of our accomplishments for the higher life, let us offer Jesus at least a few scraps of personal effort, then we can be sure that the Lord will do the rest. Wish everybody a blessed week. Thank you.